Okay, sorry. Popped up with the window that wanted me to hit continue. Okay. Um, right. So, really quickly, I'm just going to show you a few things that I've prepared, and then we'll go into the basics of bringing them into Photoshop, to sort of dissecting them, showing you how to layer things up like almost like a collage, but a digital collage or photo montage. And then we'll talk specifics with some of the tools that I think are pretty commonly used and that can help you out. So I don't know why this is in the downloads folder because I moved them all out of the downloads folder. Try to be a good example and actually make directories that make sense and start to store my files in different ways. All right. So here I have some perspectives that I've quickly clipped. There we go. There's a section perspective. But I wanted to show you guys some of the, here's some more that I'll be using. Here's a, so here's one, and then here's after just sort of, again, trying to uh, pump up that sort of idea of making these volumetric light rays sort of filter through, filter through the space, right? So it started as this pretty generic rendering in Rhino, and then suddenly we can start to paint in beams to sort of give it those atmospherics, that sense of silence and monumentality when you start to see an opening in an otherwise austere tall space, and then light streaming through. So we'll take a look at some of these. Here's a just a quick example of a planar composition. Um, And what you'll notice, I think, is that as we start to lay things up, we're not trying to make something that looks totally photorealistic. We want it to look like collage and maybe even embrace that technique. But what you can see is that we can take something that's floating in space and then begin to situate it in some sort of context with a time of day and time of year and a place, with the sky and maybe some vegetation, and start to think about that ground plane having materials. In this case, it looks like a grass, kind of a weird grass lawn, or perhaps taking this and placing it downtown Las Vegas. This is across the street from your site. This is on Las Vegas Boulevard, just north of that pawn shop. You can see over here on the right-hand side, this is the when that concrete building was under construction, being renovated, and then here's that hotel over here, and then the D off in the background. And adding some textures. In this case, I didn't actually want to add a concrete texture in Rhino or anything. I just bring this thing out with its soft shadows and its surface geometry. And then I can start to add things like wood or concrete or paving or grass or whatever sort of textures to it. That's one of the things I'll show you in Photoshop today, along with adding scale figures and some trees, which is similar but different than Illustrator, obviously. Sorry, my nose is all stuffed up. I don't know what happened, right? So here's again another example just in situ. We can start to look at ways to play around with these um, renderings of yours, right? And start to add the entourage, right? So we can start to add textures, materials subtly, time of day, time of year. We can begin to hint about where this is located and or what people would be doing inside or around it or outside these edifices that we're doing. So I'm just going to open this PSD file up in Photoshop. All right, so when I start to bring things into Photoshop, I think one of the things you'll notice right away that the big difference between Photoshop and Illustrator has to do with the types of graphics that you use. So let me just fire up Illustrator and show you. Yeah, yeah, sure. But why does it do that every time? I don't get it. All right. Right. Whereas the vector graphics in Illustrator maintain the curved outlines and then fill things in or just give it the outline a certain stroke weights and then color. And so I can zoom in and zoom in endlessly and will never pixelate. I can begin to select the constituent geometry and begin to modify the curves, right? And if I brought this into Photoshop, and I'll just do that right now, I'll just copy and paste, um, maybe paste. There we go. when I bring it in, let's see, where is it? It's tiny compared to this image. Holy moly. All right. Oh, I only had one part selected, but I think you get the idea, right? What was once a smooth set of curves that were defined by algebraic functions, quadratic equations. It could be scaled up and down endlessly without worrying about pixelation. Now, that graphic has been broken up into a grid of pixels. Each pixel is assigned a color, and the more you zoom in, the more the illusion of an image disappears, and you start to see each individual pixel, right? So this looks quite jaggedy, or what we could say pixelated, right? So that's something that you have to worry about when it comes to Photoshop, right? The sort of pixelation and the aspect ratios and the resolution of the various image assets that you pick and choose and copy and paste into your into your composition, right? Your visual composition. So I'm just going to quickly go through and start turning things off in this so you can see that it's basically just comprised of a series of layers. There's a tree layer. I can turn that one off. Little tree, happy little tree in the front. Um, there's the wood pattern that I've placed on here. Not so well. I probably would try to tone that down so it doesn't stick out so brightly. There's a concrete texture here on this guy right here. And if I turn that off, you can see just the difference between adding a concrete texture and then leaving it just plain white. Right. And then, of course, we have that horizon problem where we see where the ground and the sky meet. Usually that's mediated through things off in the distance, whether that's mountains or hills or vegetation. In this case, I'm actually adding some vegetation layers of it. There's some in the background right there, trying to sort of hide that horizon so it doesn't look like we're just sitting on an abstract tabletop that we would fall off of if we ran to the other side of the site. Let's see, there's another tree. Here's a sky. There's the grasses. And now we have our building model layer, our original asset right out of Rhino that I brought into Photoshop. Right. So in the meantime, let's build this up, right? I can, again, if I have an empty sky in Rhino and I export as a PNG and say keep translu or preserve translucency or transparency or something like that when I'm exporting things out, then it'll keep that sky transparent and then makes it much easier. Don't have to clip anything out to simply put a sky in. Now, where did this sky come from? I mean, for better or worse, I'm just using this sky. But what I'm going to do, welcome. I'm just demonstrating things in Photoshop and recording as we go. So just sit back, get settled in, relax, and watch. And this sort of set the stage for what we're going to be working on over this week and then the weekend. Okay. If you're just coming in, how do I get a sky like this? Oftentimes I'll just go to my web browser and I'll say HDRI. Let's see, high res sky or something like that. And then I go to the image search, which is such a great thing. Go to tool size and say, just want large ones. Right. And you can see that you have quite a bit of choices here. Now I'm doing this because I'm not actually working commercially. I'm just doing this for educational purposes. So I'm not so worried about copyright. And it's just the way it is. But you can see here that, suddenly I start to get different suggestions. I can be more specific. Instead of just saying high res sky, I could say cloudy sky, dramatic sky, clear blue electric sky, Nevada sky, whatever it is, right? Panorama, I can start to see what's here. And if you have your Adobe Creative Cloud, sometimes you can actually just go to the stock. If I just go up to my Creative Cloud window, there's stock that's free for you to use. Sometimes it's pretty nice. I can go to stock and marketplace, start looking at sky. When you get something for free on here, it's actually licensed to be free, so that's kind of a nice thing if that ethic is important to you. Again, we're not doing anything commercial here, so I don't worry too much. I want you to sort of learn the tools, and I rely on Google image search a lot. Okay, so anyway, here's a sky, and so what I want to emphasize here, I'm just going to go back out and sort of going through my directory in my laptop here, is I remember I talked about once you start to download and start to find helpful silhouettes, humans, trees, vegetation, skies, even other sorts of material textures. You can make your own sort of library. and start to store them all in the same place so that you can sort of, again, you can find them later when you need them a bit later. So let's see. I don't know what this is. Oh, here we go. Go to, so you can see here I have not just vector silhouette skies, but I have trees that are raster images, or in other words, they're basically a series of pixels. They're photorealistic. Sometimes their backgrounds are cut out. Sometimes their backgrounds aren't cut out. So I have to do that step. You can see that sometimes I have textures. If I want to look at the section of section cutting through the earth, and I want to actually start to render the earth as if it's being cut through with roots and other kinds of critters burrowing inside, I can find images and then start to collage things together. Pattern materials. Let's see, grit and concrete. Oh yeah, look at that. Even putting some birds in the sky, right? This is you can channel your inner Bob Ross, and as if you're doing a painting, but a digital one. So you can see that I have like all kinds of sort of textures in this little example folder that I have, right? Here's board form concrete. You can see the boards used in the formwork is imprinted. Sometimes they'll even leave the markings or even the grain of the wood. Sometimes it's very pronounced, but you can at least see the seams, and it creates this sort of vertical or horizontal strata that's imprinted into the concrete, showing and revealing how it was actually made, right? So
Josh, real quick,
yeah,
I got a
yeah.
question. So this is just my take. I don't know, like how, because I didn't take the class last summer. So how does one decide when to use Photoshop for a layout or use InDesign, for example? Because that's what InDesign is used
Oh,
for.
Photoshop for layout. I
Yeah, or
rarely
just
use
use
Photoshop for
InDesign.
layout. I usually am using it to create individual drawings or images that then get
Uh,
plopped into Illustrator or InDesign in a
because I
grid.
use InDesign for my layouts. I was just
Yeah,
wondering. Okay,
yeah.
all right. And then for what you're showing us today, um, do you want us to use for me particularly? Like, do you want me to use this? Because I use my rendering program for a
Yeah, I
lot of
want
this
you to
stuff.
try, right? Like for everybody who's new at this, I want them to try doing some of these things post-production, just collaging in Photoshop.
Okay,
Because once you start going through that steps, and then later on when you start to do the rendering parts, then you can start to figure out individually how best you work and what battles you want to fight with the rendering software versus what battles do you want to fight in Photoshop. Does that make sense? So I'm not going to
okay,
prescribe one or the other, but for now, I want everybody to sort of try collaging in Photoshop, knowing that that's one technique that might be useful to some of you or most of you at some point along and sometime in the process. But I think
okay,
individually, you'll all have different preferences and workflows that you develop. And so some of you might lean harder on Photoshop and some of you might lean harder on the rendering engine. Does that
okay.
does
I
that
was
answer
just
your
wondering.
question?
Yeah, because I was
Yeah,
just like looking at the textures and like I do know how to use it on Photoshop. I was just wondering if, it'd be too much
yeah,
trouble if I just use the rendering software because it's a lot easier for me because I just add the textures on right now
yeah,
and it just does it for me after that. But okay,
yeah. So for this, throughout Studio, you can use however you want, the workflows you like. But this one's going to be specifically, this assignment this week is going to be specifically about getting to know Photoshop. Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
This was a really quick example, right? Just sort of, I think Eric Weber and I, an old colleague of mine, we were playing around with stacking and corbelling of masonry. So we created these sort of serpentine walls that sort of lean back and forth, and then quickly placing some people inside to show scale and ambiance. So again, you can always take something like this, and then I'll just go ahead and open this up in Photoshop. Let's place an image in. Right, so you can see again, just like Illustrator, as I start to open up different files, I have tabs along the top. Um, if I go to Windows Workspace, I can say Reset Essentials or give it Essentials default. And then I have particular settings and buttons at the top, the left and the right. Um, let's see. So, right. Okay. So let's say I start with the sky. Again, I can just simply say edit, select all. Where is it? All right. Well, I'll just start getting you used to the keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to say command, but for those on the PC, it's control. Control A, Command A selects all. So it's like A for all. And then Command C, and then that copy and paste is Command V, just like you would expect from anything else. All right. And now I have this, and it's calling it, and it's putting it on a different layer, right? It's calling this layer 8. I can turn it on or off here down on my layers box. I can turn that other sky off if I'd like. I could always try to stretch this. Now, the problem with stretching it is that I'm not necessarily gaining a lot of resolution here. I might start to pixelate things if I'm not careful. And then trying to figure out exactly where I want some of this sky to actually show and where it's going to be occluded here. Once I have something like that, I can start to adjust for color. Sometimes maybe I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be a nice, vibrant blue sky. Other times I don't want people to notice the sky. I want the architecture to pop out. In that case, I might, with the layer selected, the sky layer selected, I can go to Image, pull down, and there's a set of tools here called Adjustments. And this is the easiest place to sort of find things like brightness and contrast, turning the exposure up or down. And there's a set of um, color values here. You can go to hue and saturation, and you can actually turn the saturation down. Saturation is the amount of color. So if I turn it up all the way, you can see that it's so colorful it makes your teeth hurt just looking at it. If you turn it back to 0, it looks about right. When you start to go down in saturation or completely desaturate it, then it goes to black and white or grayscale, right? Um, Now, that was how you use Photoshop for a long time, and you can go and look at all of the different tools under image pull down adjustments. All right, there's quite a few here. What's interesting about this, though, is that now you can, instead of doing something and then you keep go down the rabbit hole of editing a lot of things and then you can't undo. What you can do is actually create, instead of doing these one-time adjustments, so you can actually make adjustment layers. And those are actually parameterized, so you can always go back and undo, turn off the adjustment layer, or correct the settings however you need to. So let me just show you how this works, right? If I have my layer selected and I go to single adjustments, right? And I go color and oh, look at that, color and vibrance. That's nice. Brightness and contrast. You can see a lot of these line up exactly with the tools that we were just talking about up here in the pull down menu. I can say hue and saturation, right? Now I have a hue and saturation layer in my layers box, and what's more is that it's going to change the hue and saturation for every layer below it. Okay. I can tell that by simply starting to adjust the parameters here. So you can see that now I have this box, and anything below this, my hue and saturation layer, I can begin to adjust its saturation down or its saturation way up, right? Same with brightness, or same with hue. You guys know what hue means? You guys probably haven't talked much about color theory, except for the folks with their BLA or their Bachelor of Science in Interior Design Architecture. But color theory, or sorry, hue, just is basically just talking about a color value, right? So red is a hue, yellow is a hue. The primary colors, the secondary colors, the tertiary colors, red orange and red violet and yellow green, whatever. Those are all hues, right? So when we talk about hue, we can change this from the sort of default and we can start to add colorization. We can say, let's add some red hue, let's add some magenta hue or some blue, some violet, etc. All right. So you can go and play around with these tools. What's nice about it when you do it this way, you make an adjustment layer, is I can always go back to the adjustment layer and say, oh, maybe I want to up the contrast a little bit. Let's turn the saturation up. Let's change this. I want just a little cooler. I'm going to add some blue and maybe even a little violet to it, right? And then you come back later, and you can say, well, maybe that was the wrong thing. Let's try it without so much color. And you can start to again, you can edit as you go. You can come back to these parameters. They show up every time you select this layer, right? The properties, and you can begin to tweak things. And I mentioned this just a minute ago that this will affect all the layers below it. What if I just want to affect just the one layer below it? I don't want to affect this guy. I just want to affect the one right below it. I can hold down my Option key. I think it's Alt on a PC keyboard. And you see how when I go back and forth between I put my cursor right here between my adjustment layer and my geometry layer, and I hold down that key, my my cursor changes and it just has this box and says, oh, an arrow pointing down to the one below it. If I click that, then you'll notice that I have an icon over here, and that means that this hue saturation layer is only affecting the layer immediately below it. Okay, right. So it's a really long-winded way of saying that. Sorry. I'm not sure how else better to describe it. All right. So I can begin to layer things up as I go. And that's frankly what we do a lot of here in Photoshop, right? So, for instance, how did I put in grasses? How did I put in shrubs and trees? Basically the same way. So let me just go to um, this. I even have water textures, right, from a below if I want. Let's see. Let's try to find some shrubbery. Let's do this one. No, let's do this one. I like that one. I'm going to right click and I'm just going to say open up in Photoshop. All right, there it is. I'm going to zoom in. You can see that this is not a high resolution image, but it's going to be in the background and it's going to be smaller. So I think it'll do. But one of the things you can see is, let me just demonstrate this. Like, let's go through the workflow. Select all, Command A, copy, Command C, and I'll go to where I want to paste it in and I say Command V, and ta-da, there it is. I'm going to move this up. The layers are, the way they show up on top of each other, like they're layers of trace paper, is basically governed by the layer or the arrangement, the order that they're arranged in the layers menu here. All right. What you can see is that I quite literally had that white background in my image, and it's going to copy and paste that in as well. This obviously wouldn't work so well to have a big white box around this. So let's talk a little bit about that. Um, One way I might think about this is to simply go back to the original image asset and let's just go ahead and trim this and then save it in a format where the next time I use it, it'll always have that transparent background. Now, what's interesting about this is that I can do these things with my selection tools. And or another workflow that sometimes works really well is I can use the sort of machine vision tools that Photoshop has learned from machine learning AI, and it can actually try to pick out the subject and then the background, and then separate the two, or delete the background, or just select the foreground, or the whatever. So let me show you how the old way of doing this worked. I have my cursor, these arrows pointed north, south, east, west. But right below that, I have what looks like a box that's with dashed lines, and that's my selection box. I can draw a selection rectangle, and then I can copy and paste just what's inside that rectangle. Right? If I click and hold, you can see that there's other shapes I can use. A round tool, like an elliptical tool that can be a circle or stretched into ellipse, etc. If I go down to the one below that, I click and hold, I have a selection brush tool, I have a lasso tool, the polygonal lasso tool, and the magnetic lasso tool. Let's just talk quickly about what those mean. If I go to the freehand lasso tool, I can just make my own shape here, and I can select things inside or outside, right? If I go to the polygonal lasso tool, now I can start to make a polyline as my selection, but I can freehand it. And the magnetic lasso tool is pretty cool. The tool is cool. All right. Because you can start to go around the edges and it starts to try to pick up as you move your cursor around the edges, the sort of boundaries between, in this case, my object, the subject of this, which is a sort of a shrub, and then that white background, right? So I'm just moving around and it's trying to magnetic, and it's not getting everything. It's not perfect. Okay. So um, those are ways when you need to, if you need to take something over and just do it yourself, you can do it that way. But there's actually a quicker way of doing this. If I look at my layers box, right now I just have only one layer. It's called background and it's locked. See this padlock? If I double click it and just hit OK, suddenly I have a layer and I can turn it on or off. And then in the background, it's just clear, right? It's nothing. So I can select that layer and I'm just going to show in this properties box that if you look down at quick actions, I can select the subject. And look at that. It's tried to select everything around for me based off of its understanding of pixels. Or you can say remove background. So let me just unselect everything. Just say remove background. There we go. Kind of like the same thing. Select the subject, then you invert the selection to be the background, and then you just delete it away, right? Um, Let me just undo that to show you that. If I say select subject, and I have the shrub selected, but then I want to delete everything that's not selected, what I can do is I can go to the select pull down, right? I'm worrying about how to select things. I can say select pull down, and I can say inverts. And now I've selected everything that wasn't selected before. Everything that was selected before is unselected, right? I just sort of inverted the selection. And now I can just hit delete on my keyboard and it goes away, right? So something similar, right? Depending on if you want to remove the background or you want to select the subject. Um, but let's just select that subject. There it is. It's got a pretty good understanding. Now, if you look in on, it's going to have some white haloing in some places. That's unfortunate, but we can always look and see if that's an issue or not. And if so, we can begin to touch things up with a brush later on in the larger composition. Control C, Control V. All right, now we have something without that crazy white background on it. All right. So I can begin to layer things up. Another interesting thing now in Photoshop is that let's say that this is way too small and it's going to be pixelated. There are ways of upscaling now. It used to be that, the rule of thumb was you can always take away information, you can't really add information. But now we have, based off of generative AI, it can read the image, it can sort of understand what it is, and now start to add information. So if we do generative upscale, and Topaz Gigapixel is the industry standard. I actually have a standalone version I pay, gosh, like $400 a year for as a subscription for the professional work I do. But I can say output two times, let's go four times. If there's a face or humans in here, I can also run a model that tries to recover the face and tries to read someone's face and then try to fill in the appropriate details. Um, Upgrade to access premium feature. Okay. Well, clearly my UNLV count doesn't. Let's see. Generative upscale, Fire. Okay, I'll just use Firefly, Adobe's in-house model. It should work. And what's nice about this is that it does actually try to add information and tries to again reads the image, compare the before after or mask areas you don't want upscaled. Um, it's not really all that great. Firefly is kind of mid, honestly. But anyway, so that you have those options if you'd like to play around with them as you go, right? Like, I mean, generative AI isn't just a bunch of standalone weird things anymore. It's been integrated into most of the existing workflows that we have. Photoshop's is really pretty nice because you can start to select things in or out and start to remove things. It's a lot easier sometimes than having to paint them out with an erase tool or an erase brush. Let's see here. What do we have? Try to look for some more vegetation to use. Here we go. I took that photo in San Diego. Let's see. We have birds. Yeah, why not? Let's try birds. Open in Photoshop. You can see that, this one already has the background clipped out. It's a PNG file that preserves the transparency. So I can say Command A to select all, Command C to copy, then go to what I want to copy into and paste, and then add the birds flying through the sky. Now, sometimes the birds look great and sometimes they look a little goofy. If that's the case, and you want to make the birds look really nice, and they're particularly if they're in the foreground, where'd they go? Birds. Not sure where the birds layer is anymore. Let me just zoom in so I can make sure I'm selecting the birds. Maybe. There we are. As I could always try to scale them up. Again, you run the risk of some pixelation here. Let's say I have them flying through the sky. It looks like they're all sort of going more or less in this direction, right? And so what I might do, and I'm just showing you a range of stuff, right, that you can start to think about in Photoshop, just to get the gears in your brain going. I don't expect you to remember where all of these tools are right off the bat. But I can select these things. I can say filter. Let's see, name this bird so I can remember exactly where it's at. I go to filter. I can say blur. I can say motion blur. Then I can give it the angle I want, and I can give it the amount of blur I want. Seems a bit extreme. Maybe a little, yeah, sort of like that. So it looks like they're actually in situ. They're sort of actually flying through the air in a direction, right? So you can again play around with these things. What I'm trying to get to here is that you want to start to gather assets like skies and textures and trees and plants, maybe even some, uh, in addition to the flora, maybe some fauna like birds or critters or people. And you can then play around with collaging them in. That's the best way to learn the tool and remember and develop the muscle memory for this stuff, right? And I'll be here with you all week to sort of help you troubleshoot things as you go. You can't remember some certain thing that, where something was, or you can go back and watch the recording if you need to, etc. So let me just show you a few more things here. We're going to talk a little bit about making an overlay layer and adding some textures. The other thing I want to do is talk about clone stamp and start adding some ground cover. And then we'll start to use our brushes. We can use brushes to erase, brushes to add, brushes to lighten or darken. And so I'll go over where some of those tools are. Again, this is just a starter, so you'll just the way you learn is really to sort of start to deploy these tools on your own and use them over and over again with some practice. But let's say right here, look at that nice concrete texture. Man, I love concrete. That's a pretty nice texture right there. All right, so open with. I'll bring that up into Photoshop. Here we go. Command A to select all. Command C to copy. I'm just going to place this in here, Command V. Now, I have a couple of things I need to do here, but let's say for one, I want to sort of understand where I'm going to place this thing. I'm going to try to draw with my cursor here really quickly. There we are. And I'm going to try to place this texture on this face right here, the face of this surface. And I also want it to go around this. That's why I'm picking this one. That little more difficulty showing some of the things you might have to come across when you start to add these things. So yeah, that's my goal here. All right. So I have this layer, and as you can see, um, when I just sort of click and drag, I can move it around. You can see that it has these handles. I can scale it. But if I go to the corners and I move off I move slightly outwards, you can see that the cursor turns to a rotation tool. Now, when I hold down the Shift key, I can rotate in what looks like 15-degree increments. Oh, yeah. And I can just sort of turn that to be vertical. All right. And look at this concrete layer. It's called layer 10. I'm going to call this concrete. And I'm actually, by layer, each layer I can turn down its opacity, just like I could in Illustrator up top. Here, when I select a layer, I can turn its opacity down, and that'll let me understand and see where I need to actually clip this texture, right? Not done yet by any stretch of the imagination, right? But I want to be able to see what's below this thing. And now I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to very carefully use the polygonal lasso tool that I talked about before. Here's my cursor, rectangular selection tool. Here's my polygonal lasso selection tool. All right. I like polygonal because it helps. It's really easy to make some straight edges here. And I'm just going to go around as carefully as I can and snap. Now remember, there's just pixels, so there's no geometry to actually snap to. So it's my judgment and coordination and eyeballs all working together, just like when you sketch something in your sketchbook. Okay. So at the very least, I want to get rid of all the concrete outside of this shape, right? All the concrete texture. So I've selected the shape I want, and now I'm going to say select inverse. And now you can see that for this layer, the concrete layer, let me just make sure it's selected. I have everything selected, and then there's a little island of unselected stuff in the middle. Now I can hit delete, and it gets rid of everything except what was inside. Okay. Now, I've turned the opacity way down. I'm going to turn it back up, and you can see just how pathetic it is. What I want to do is I want to find a way to show that texture subtly, but also to let people see the sort of soft shadows and surface definitions that came with the actual rendering, right? As you can see, for instance, here, let's say on this surface, right, that obviously it's darker here, gradients to brighter where there's sun. It darkens again here and here, right? I want to see those soft shadows and tone and textures, but I also want to see the concrete texture. So I'm going to go to that concrete layer. There we go. And just going to make the layer box a little larger here if I can. Let me just close those tools. There we are. All right, and you can see right now it's called a normal layer. I'm just right above in the top of the layers box. You see normal, and I have the concrete layer selected. Its opacity set to 100. What I can do is I can go and make it a different type of layer. I can say maybe it's a darken layer, a multiply layer, color burn, linear burn, darker, lighter, screen, color dodge, linear dodge, overlay layer, soft light, hard light. Some of these are pretty nice. I like that dark burn. Right? So now it still has the qualities of of sort of the way the rendering understood light and how there was dark places and light places, but it also has that concrete texture. It's by simply just selecting that layer and then calling it a color burn layer. All right. I could go around and do that. I could get more concrete textures and start to place each one on different faces. Let me just do one with that's not so easy. A little more degree of difficulty here. Oh gosh, what is this watermark? That's lame. Wonder if I can get rid of that. Cobblestone. Let me try to find a Douglas fir flooring. Well, I'll try to use this here in just a minute. But let me point out another place that I usually look for. I oftentimes use Google Images and I'll say high res, wood, texture, blanks or something like that, depending on what I want, and trying to find something that I can then repeat over and over again or make my own texture that's high res. There's also another interesting tool, architectures. Let's see, here we go, architectures. Digital material library for architects and designers. Find, edit, and create textures for your project and create things. So here I can say create, and I can say what kind of texture do I want, what kind of joints or patterns, sort of the reveals, what kind of texture do I want, what kind of material, um, white marble. Ooh, look at that. Herringbone white marble. That looks weird. You never would actually do that to marble, I don't think. But anyway, but you can again start to play around. You can start to give it a particular aspect ratio. You can start to adjust things here, and then save out an image you can use. And again, I say this because this is also useful with what Isaac was talking about. If you need to make your own shader material for rendering inside a rendering engine, you can also come here and start to make your own. Make sure it's at the right resolution, the right scale, and is tileable to use. So I think there's actually a way you can actually make a paid account here and access more tools. But suffice to say, I just always try to find the freebies, and I'm not usually I don't usually need all of that. I don't usually pay for things if I don't have to. I'm a cheapskate. Whatever. Anyway, so let's talk about that wood pattern because this does actually have directionality that, to line things up and make things work with the right scale. You need to be a little more careful here. Actually, let me just high res texture wood. Let's just see if I can find a better one to use without the watermark. This is Adobe stock. It's seamless. Let's visit. Let's see if I can gank it here. That doesn't look so bad. Standard license, free with trial. Is it gonna let me right click? Right click. Yeah, and I can just take this out. So I'll just maybe use this for the sake of argument here really quickly. All right, I just downloaded that to my downloads folder. Bad Josh. I should probably do something like place it in a directory so I can find it later, but whatever. I'm just going to go quickly open this up. You can see here that I have some unfortunate watermark. I'm just going to go ahead and say generative fill, select it and say remove text. See what happens when I do that. It'll give me three options over here to pick from each time. It's a heck of a lot easier than trying to repaint these things in. Oh, there we go. Perfect. I like it. Save. Oh, let's see. I need to flatten the layers so it can be saved as a JPEG again. Yeah. Save, whatever. All right. But really what I'm going to do is I want to select all, Command A, copy, Command C, and let's go back here. Where is it? I have so many things open. Where is it? It's not funny anymore. And then paste. All right. So let's say I wanted to apply this to, let's see here. Let me find my annotate tools so you can see my cursor here. Let's say I wanted to apply it to this face and also wrap it around the bottom and the side. And also to cut out anything that would, be behind this. So that's sort of my target here with this stuff. So I'm going to show you a few more tools that you can use when it comes to making these textures and beginning to distort them, stretch them, or whatever you need to do to make them fit the perspective and also to fit um, the geometry you're trying to make them into, right? So I'm going to paste again and paste two more. Paste another one here. Put those together, see if I can see a seam. It doesn't look too bad. All right. I'm going to select both of these, copy, paste, and I'm just going to make this bigger. There we are. Oof. All right. Now, one thing I'm going to do, you see how I can see that seam right there? Maybe I'll try better to maybe book match this. What I mean by that is I'm going to try to mirror this vertically. I go to edit, transform, flip. Is it flip vertically? Yeah. There we go. Now it's book matched. You can still see where it gets brighter and then back to dark, but the transition there is a little more subtle. Um, just like if you're turning a book, reading a book, opening up the spread. I'm going to go ahead and select these. You can see I have four individual layers. I have them all selected at once. And I'm going to right click in here and say merge these layers together, the ones I have selected. So now I just have one layer of wood. I've merged. And same thing I did before. I'm going to go ahead and adjust the opacity so I can see what I'm doing underneath this layer and start to stretch it in the way I want, right? So I have a couple of things I need to do. I need to match the perspective. I need to match the scale. And let's just try that. Yeah, I still need a little more height there. Maybe I stretched it way too much. There we go. It's not too bad. Now what I'm looking to do is I'll zoom in here just a bit, but I want to make the pattern of the wood match the edges, right? There's a slight perspective to the rendering, and I need to sort of make this thing match to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Image, make sure that layer is selected, go to Image, and no, sorry, Edit, pull down, Transform, okay? And you can see that I have a bunch of tools hidden in the pull down menu here, and Edit, Transform. Things like Scale, Rotate, Skew, Distort, Perspective, and Warp. And I believe I want Distort. And what that'll let me do is start to match up better that perspective so that the seams look the way I want them to look. Oh, yes. All right. And now I just need to do a few more quick moves. One thing I'm going to do, though, really quickly before I start to draw a selection and start to trim things away. I'm going to go ahead and right click on this layer and I'm going to make a duplicate. And you'll see why. It might not be obvious why I'm doing this now, but you'll see why I think here in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and move that down. I'm going to turn it off so I can't actually see it or do anything with it right now, accidentally delete it away or anything. But it's going to be there later when I need it the most. And you'll see why here in just a few minutes. All right, so let's go over the basic things again and make sure that layer is selected. And I'm going to go and let me turn off my annotate tools. I'm going to go to my polygonal lasso tool. I'm going to zoom in so I can make a reasonable judgment call on where all of these edges are. I'm going to start here. If you use both fingers just touching your touchpad and your laptop, you just basically can pan around up, down, left, right. I'm just going to go around. And I think you'll see what the problem is here in just a minute. Let me go around and I'll invert my selection and delete everything around my shape, not in, and keep everything inside my shape. Let's see how close I am here. All right, so there I have everything inside selected. If I invert that selection, now I can hit delete. All right, now here's the problem, right? This I think looks pretty good when I see the wood wrapping around this side. And it looks completely off when I see it not wrapping around in the perspective of that bottom edge, right? So let's fix that. And that's one of the reasons why I made a copy of this layer, so I can use it here in just a minute. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure this layer is still selected. And I'm just going to go ahead and select this bottom and get rid of this thing here. Let's just get rid of all of this. Oh, come on now. There we go. All right, get rid of it. All right. And now I'm going to go ahead and open up this layer. Now you'll see that what I need to do is I need to take this layer and start to use the same tool that I did before. Edit, transform, distort. And what I'm going to try to do is match everything up to the bottom of that surface. And at the same time, I want all the seams of the wood to look like they match up and just continue around the bottom edge, right? It's a pretty slick detail when you can pull that off. You get a good carpenter that can make sure that everything sort of lines up. Yeah, let's see. Good carpenters are hard to find, but once you find them, you got to pay them well so that they just keep coming back for more business. All right. And you get what you pay for, right? When it comes to these things. All right, so let's see here. I need to stretch this out quite a bit more. Ooh, almost there. That one, that one, that one, that one. Yeah, just a little more. And I'm trying to match the perspective. So here in the perspective, if I zoom in just a smidge here, maybe, right, you can see that my edge does this, and these need to actually follow that, right? So I need to adjust the bottom angle here quite a bit. Let me just get rid of this. Let me move this. Make sure that that matches up as best as I can. And then this would be there. Let's try something like that. I don't have the patience for this morning, but suffice to say, let's see. So I have that layer selected, and I'm going to go ahead and just go around here, tell it which parts I want to keep. Ta-da! Invert selection, hit delete on my keyboard. Oh, yes, there we go. Right. Now I can take both of these layers and I can just sort of merge them together. Let's merge them. Merge layers. I can turn their opacity back up. Let's turn the opacity back up before I merge them. There we go. Now let's merge layers. And now I can think in terms of which type of layer looks better. Darken, multiply, linear burn, darker color, lighten, screen, dodge. Oof, let's see, overlay, soft light, hard light. Darken looks kind of weird. Multiply. Let's try multiply. And then what I'm going to do So I'm going to turn the transparency down a bit. And then what I might also do, again, here's my layer 18. I go to adjustments, go to color and vibrance, and I'm going to hit control, or sorry, alt or option, depending on which operating system you're using. And I'm going to click, make sure that it's just applying to that layer. And I'm going to turn up its vibrance, turn down its saturation, make it look little more neutral. There we go. And I can always come back to that layer again and start to change things around as I need. So what's another interesting thing about this is let's say I want to get a little darker. I want to start painting some more shadows in. There's several ways you can do this. If I have images of humans, I can then do the distort and then make a copy of their silhouettes and cast them on the ground. Let me show you that way. But first, let's say I just want to, let me just bring up my annotate tools one more time here. All right, here we go. Let's say I look at this and I want to sort of make this a little darker in here, right? I want this to sort of be casting a little more darker of a shadow here. I can do that in Photoshop quite easily. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have that texture layer selected, right? It's now grayed. It's selected. And I'm going to go to my left-hand toolbar here, and you can see that I have something called a paintbrush. I have something called clone stamp. I have an eraser tool. I have fill. But if I go down here, this looks like what's a little lollipop or something, and it's called dodge and burn. If I click and hold, there's dodge and there's burn. Dodge does exactly what this little video explains. It lightens things up. So you can start to lighten up your image very specifically with a brush. Burn is the opposite, right? You can start to darken things. So if I go to burn and I look at my settings for my paintbrush, it's right now it's set to 65 pixels. I can make it bigger. Let's see, 120, 348. Let's try something like in between. Yeah, about one, almost one, say 80. I'm going to turn the hardness down. You can make it either a hard round brush, you'll see a very hard edge, or you can make it soft and have it feathered. And now I can just go around. I don't know, it might be a little subtle here, but I can go around and start to paint some tone. I'm not doing a very good job of this, but you can start to darken things up. You still see the textures, you still see everything underneath. You're just basically darkening, playing a mask that's feathered and start to darken things up. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. All right. Let's talk about when you have crisper shadows down below. Let's add a human or two, right? You'll see here that, wow, that's kind of a nice background. Look at that. That's magic right there. Let's use one of these people. What about that guy? No, that's like vectorized, so it looks kind of goofy. Let's see. Yeah, what about her? She looks, yeah, she looks like someone I'd see just walking around. Let's see. So let's open her up in Photoshop. She already has her background cut out. Command A to select all, Command C to copy. Let's go Command V. Let's paste her in somewhere. Oh, sorry, let's see here. Command V. There she is. All right. And let's place her here and let's think about shadows just for a minute. Let's put her right there. All right. So she looks like she's floating, right? One way to think about this, you could, is to simply make a paintbrush. And let's see, where is she? She's a layer 14. So I'll call this human. And then down below that, I'll make a new layer. I'll hit the plus sign at the bottom of the thing, drag it underneath the human, and I'll call this human shadow. And I could just quite literally go and make sure that my active color is black. I use a paintbrush, going to the left-hand side, the paintbrush tool. I can change the size. Let's go with like a 97. Let's say soft. And I could begin to quickly add something that sort of starts faint. And then I start to turn the opacity down. I could start to draw my own shadow. Um, and sometimes that works better. I'm not being very conscientious about like how good of a shadow that was. I'm just doing this very quickly to show some workflows. Let me go ahead and delete that human shadow layer. Another way of doing this is I can take the human, I can right click it, say duplicate the layer, the human layer. Now it's called human copy. I'll move it down. I have it selected. I can go to edit, transform, distort. And now I can begin to, whoa, it looks creepy at the beginning here, but trust me, it'll work. And I can begin to move this around, adjust the perspective as needed, right? And now, of course, it looks like a mirror. That doesn't work so well. What I can do is I can go to adjustments, image pull down adjustments, and go to exposure. I can turn down the exposure so it just becomes a black silhouette. And then I can take that layer and turn its opacity down, right? And if it's still a little too sharp compared to the other shadows, then I can maybe I can do a little bit of a blur filter around it. Just sort of say blur the edges a bit here. Let's see, give it a little bit of a blur. There we are. It's a little less crisp now. Or if it's just a little too dark, I can always lighten it up a bit, right? And you can still see the textures and things below, just like a shadow would, just a little darker, right? It's the absence of the amount of light that you direct light you would see, right? Okay, so that's a lot in a very short amount of time. And I do just want to demonstrate a few more things since I'm recording this. Again, we'll have the rest of the week for you guys to try all this stuff out and your perspectives that you've captured, your perspective PNGs or JPEGs that you've captured out of Rhino now are raw images, and you can bring them into Photoshop. You can begin to start to try this yourself, right? But I did want to show a few more things here. Let's see. There was an example I showed with the volumetric light rays that talks a little bit about selection and feathering edges and painting. So let me just find that really quickly here. I think it's in, here we are, Photoshop demo. Yeah, here we go. So I go from this to that. Let me just open up that PSD. You can see what I've done here. So this is what I started with. Let's see, I probably adjusted a few things here, like the darkness and contrast. Again, I can go to image adjustments, brightness and contrast. I can turn the brightness down, turn it up, can up the contrast. Can see that there's some light leaks in Rhino around these corners. I'd probably want to clean those things up. Then what do I do? I add some concrete texture to this, looks like. Oh, but here's what I really am interested in, right? These light rays, right? So adding volumetric light rays streaming through these windows where the source of light's coming from, and then having them sort of project down to the light patterns that you see on the floor or on the walls, right? So let me just demonstrate what that looks like here. Here's the sort of original base rendering. And what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to think in terms of my selection tools, right? I'm going to go polygonal lasso tool, right? And that way I could draw, maybe you see where this is going. I could start to draw a shape like that. And then I could start to paint this in with a white or a white yellow, and then I can turn down the transparency. But here's the problem. If I'm not thinking a few steps ahead, here's the problem with that. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to go to my active color and set it to white, maybe even give it a little bit of yellow, something like that. And I'm going to use my paintbrush. I'm just going to go ahead and just going to smack this thing up. Yeah, there we go. And of course, I could change the this layer's opacity, but you can see that I have edges that are quite too crisp, right? And so what I want to do is I want to be able to feather those edges so that they're softer, right? So let me just undo that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some things you can do with your selection. I'm going to use polygonal selection tool again. But before I start drawing, I'm going to say feather up here at the top, and I'm going to say, let's give it a feathering, in other words, a gradient as it fades out from the edge of, let's say, 30 pixels. I'll just try that as a starting point. Now I'm going to do something very similar here. I'm going to go out to this, go out to here, go out to here and here, try to go around a bit. can see that the edges start to round out a bit. And let's see here. I'll go back to my paintbrush tool. You can see that the edges now are a little more forgiving. Now let's see what we have. Oops, wrong layer. Really adjust that opacity down. Oh, I drew this in the wrong layer. That's why. Oopsie. Okay, layer four. Let's smash this left mouse button here. All right. Now let's turn down the opacity. Okay, so we're getting there. Um, Now what we have here is that this would be coming through a hard edge. And so I need to actually then start to select around the hard edges parts. And I had my feather still on 30. So let me just undo that. Let's say feather 0. Let's start over again here. I'll try to act a little smarter next time. Uh-huh. All right. Go around, clean this up just a bit. I'm gonna hit delete. Now it looks like it really is coming through that window, hopefully. A little better, right? So you can begin to play around with these tools in the similar way that you would, let's say, think about watercolor. So I made this look like it goes off behind this wall. I also need to clean that part up. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my putting the lasso tool, put it to this edge, hit delete, right? Just so the light's pretty clearly occluded. It slips behind that wall, casting on the floor behind it. All right, so and of course I can always up the opacity or increase it depending on what kind of effect I really want. Maybe that's too much yellow, in which case I could then desaturate it a bit, take out so that the color values just so it's white, right? Okay. So there's a lot here I'm going over in a very quick amount of time. It's a crash course today. But I wanted to go through a number of things that get you thinking about what tools are at your disposal here in Photoshop. And how do I put this? Um, if you want to go back later, you can it's some other time. You can always ask me questions, but you also have this video at your disposal to go back and rewatch or try to find the exact time mark where I demonstrated one thing or the other. All right. But suffice to say, I could again. In fact, I think I did it here. Started doing it here. Started adding a concrete texture to this wall. I could always go back in and start to use dodge and burn and start to burn around that window. It'd be a little more silhouetted, I think. Um, Maybe that's a little off, a bit extreme there. I usually like to go subtle with these things, but try them out. Okay, so uh, let's talk a little bit about some of the things I would encourage you to start off trying between now and tomorrow. And then tomorrow, we can take a look at where everybody's at. I can start to answer questions. There'll be lots and lots and lots of difficulties and things to troubleshoot, and I'll be here for it, right? That's why we make the week really count. Okay. So let me just close out of here, but let's look at maybe I let's see one. Oh, it wants to go to downloads. Okay. Documents, teaching, 2026. Yeah, I think it's in here. Yeah, it's probably in here. Right. So something along the lines of this, I'd like to sort of see you start, right? Trying to add a few textures, trying to add some humans to talk about scale, start adding trees. And in perspective, I'm just going to quickly demonstrate this, but in Photoshop, you see how we have these rulers along the top and the left? Again, if I go to Workspace, Essentials Default, you have those in Illustrator and it works the same way. If I click and drag from that horizontal ruler, I can then place a horizontal guide. It's not going to actually be part of my image. It's just there when I open this up in Photoshop for me to see. And what I do is I usually try to establish where eye level is for anybody on the, let's say, walking along the street in my perspective. So if I'm at eye level, and this is my eye level, this is everybody else's eye level, if they're the exact same height as me. Sometimes people are a little taller than me, or sometimes a little shorter than me. Their eye level might differ, but this is the sort of datum. And now you can see that as I start to add humans, basically just those silhouettes from the silhouette pack, I can copy them in Illustrator, paste them into Photoshop, size them the way I need to, then place them, right? Again, I'll just quickly do that just so you see. Here's some humans. All right. There they are. Wow. High five moment. That's so cheesy. All right, let's try it anyway. So I'll go here and I will, let's see, paste as pixels. Sure, why not? You know what? I'm going to hit cancel. Let's paste. Let's go as smart object. I like smart objects. I think what that lets me do is it'll keep referencing that Illustrator file and I can start to scale these things up and maintain their vector part. So let's say I think I'm the same height as this guy, right? On the left. I'm just going to move him so that his eye position is the same as mine. And then what I can do is I can start to scale to determine where they're at actually off in space here. So if they're in the foreground, right, I can determine where their feet hit the ground, and that begins to tell my brain, anybody's brain that's looking at this, where they actually are located in space, right? And that's how you do it with a, in this case, slight 2 point perspective, but mostly a 1 point perspective, right? Do you know what I mean by that? So if I look, the primary perspective here is, let's see if I can draw this again. Right, you can start to see where these things start to line up somewhere at a vanishing point, somewhere in the center. I'm not very carefully drawing it where that point would line up, right? Over here, if we were straight on, these things would be parallel. They actually go off to a vanishing point way off into space, off to the left, all right? Um, so for all practical purposes, we call this a 2 point perspective or a 1 point perspective, even though technically it's a 2 point. And of course, we could always turn down their opacity. We could start to cast shadows if we want to. Again, just make it so that this guy looks like it's sort of interfering with our understanding of the scene. Maybe I'll put him out on the street, crossing the street, coming in, or whatever. So anyway, you can start to place and start to try your best to start to create a place of, sense of place. And so what I'm asking you to do between now and tomorrow is just fail early, fail often. Try this out. Open up one of your perspectives. It could be a vertical perspective, it could be a horizontal one. I don't care. But then start to place some humans. Try to get them so that they look accurate. Try to place some trees or vegetation, and then try adding some material textures and making them overlay layers, right? So for instance, I look at this one. It's called oh 04. I can turn it on or off, but it's basically just a texture, right? Just another layer here to turn on or off. Same with this concrete, right? Concrete texture. Okay. Try your best. Come trying things that you know you can't possibly achieve, right? And then come with lots of questions on Wednesday morning, and we'll take a look together and fix things as we go, right? And this is how you learn these tools, really. I can just show you where buttons are, but it's really using them over and over again, right? Again, expertise is demonstrated through hours of practice, and so we're beginning that now, right? So we've started to cover Rhino drafting and modeling workflows, geometric operations like rotate, scale, and move, snapping, things like that. Then bringing images out, starting to take an Illustrator and in Photoshop, starting to do some post-production for some very basic design communication images, right? Some conceptual images that talk about the ideas behind your projects, right? So a lot of you I saw had some perspectives. I think it was one of the things I asked you to do last week. They're look pretty raw looking, right? Obviously. Try bringing them into Photoshop now. One, between now and tomorrow and start this process. Go through some of the workflows that I demonstrated. And again, the idea here is to fail faster, right? The more you try and the more you sort of understand how things work, or you come back and you say, this wasn't working for me, let's talk through it. So I can overcome the learning curve. That's how we really make the next couple of days count. So over the long weekend, you can finish things up. All right. Are there any questions before I stop recording that might be beneficial to record so that you can always go back later if you're unsure what I or you don't have remember what I said or something? I'm open to questions. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.